Hey, creative souls, word witches, writers. Thank you for tuning in. I'm happy that you're here. My name is Johnny. I am a published fiction writer and a retired adjunct writing professor. For 2 decades, I helped college students get their words on the page. Now I teach fiction writing and screenwriting to adults in custody. I call myself a word witch. If you want to know more about what I mean by that, check out my video called On Being a Word Witch. I believe I'm on this earth to heal the world through stories, whether it's the ones that I write and tell or the ones that I help you write and tell. I'm fairly new here on YouTube, so I would sincerely appreciate any likes, shares, and subscribes so I can grow this channel and do more in my quest to heal the world through story. Because as I always say, stories can heal the world, so let's do it together. So today I want to talk about how the full moon in Capricorn that's coming up can enhance your writing practice. Before I get to the details of that, I want to mention a couple of things. Through the end of June, my Alchemy of Writing membership group is still at the $18 founding membership price. And so once you're in at that level, you maintain that price for the life of your membership. And that includes what the membership currently offers, which I'll explain in a minute, and everything that's to come in the future. So it's a great deal. As of July 1st, the price will be going up by $10. Right now, it is $18 if you meet for the online writing gathering once a week, and it's $28 if you meet twice a week. So we meet Wednesday evenings, Saturday mornings, and then in July, it's going to go up to $28 and $38. In addition to the silent gatherings online where we write together, there's also a monthly live Q&A, usually the last Thursday of every month, but this month I've had to move it up a week because I had another obligation. So you have those once a month. I'm also in the process of setting up an online community so that we will all have a place to gather and so that you can share your work, talk to each other in a way that feels quiet and safe. It won't be on Facebook because that platform just absolutely rattles my system. So it'll be a nice, quiet environment. And I'm doing this because I have found the people that generally gravitate towards me in my work are empaths, intuitives, HSPs, neurodivergents. So I want to create a nice, safe, quiet community for us to convene around the work that we do. I will also in July start offering a monthly writing class, something that has to do with some aspect of writing. And then also my Alchemy of Writing course. It's very close to finished. I just need to record it. And then it will also be available to you as a member for free. And so you won't have to pay anything for that. For the monthly classes, you will get a really good discount on those. And I don't have pricing yet on the monthly classes. So I will let you know as soon as I have that pulled together. So that's basically what the Alchemy of Writing membership group is about. And then I also have a free guide for you called Alchemy of Writing, First Steps to Conjure and Nurture Your Writing Practice. It's absolutely free, and it's actually a distillation of the Alchemy of Writing course to kind of get you started before it's ready. Links to both of those will be in the description. So to learn more about the membership group and register, and then also to get the complimentary guide for your writing practice. All right, so let's get to this upcoming full moon. On Friday, June 21st, which is the summer solstice, we will have a full strawberry moon in Capricorn at 6:08 p.m. Pacific time, which is where I'm located. And as always, for any astrology that I use to talk about writing in this video, I went to astrologer Nadia Shah to see what she had to say about this upcoming full moon and a couple of other configurations that are happening earlier in the week before we see that full moon. So we'll take a look at those now and start to really think about what that means to you as a writer and to your writing practice. An interesting thing about this full moon is that we usually think of full moons as a closure to things. While this one is in some ways, as Nadia says, it's also setting up what will come to light the next full moon in July, which will also be in Capricorn. Okay, so we'll get to that in just a minute. So some other things to keep in mind right now is that we have some planets nearing the end of Gemini. So they've been sitting in Gemini and they're almost to move out of Gemini and into Cancer. And those planets are Venus, Mercury, and of course the Sun, because we're about to enter Cancer season. Yay, Cancers. I'm a Cancer, so hey, fellow Cancers. And all of these will be squaring Neptune just before moving into Cancer. So some interesting tensions are being set up, which could feel a little bit trying, and I'll talk about what those are and what that might feel and look like. Nadia says that with Neptune transit, sometimes we, in the moment when we're in this big change that's happening, we don't really notice it until after the fact. And then we can look back and say, wow, a lot happened during that time. I think this is probably because Neptune is a planet of illusion. And so it can kind of veil things and present things to us in a way that maybe aren't exactly factual. That can be an interesting time for creators. It can also be challenging when we're trying to make decisions, right? And even though we're not quite there yet, I can already feel this, and I'm sure a lot of you can too, because like I said earlier, I tend to attract very sensitive people. So my guess is that a lot of you are feeling that there's some sort of change that's happening. I mean, I think we've all been feeling it for the last, 5-ish years, but I definitely feel for me that there's a corner about to be turned, is the best way that I can describe it. So who knows what this will mean for you in your writing practice. It might mean that you'll submit a story to a journal or a magazine, or your novel to an agent, and maybe you'll hear back next month and you'll get a yes, right? And Nadia says we've been paying a lot of attention to Aquarius and Pluto recently, but this Neptune at 29 degrees, just ready to move out of Gemini, is really what the collective, she says, all of us, will respond to moving into next year. So it feels like a very critical, important time. You might even use the word auspicious about this time. So the summer that we're about to have will really set the stage for a lot of what's to come. And she says that we will see more kind of scientific approaches to understanding things. Astrologer Christopher Witecki is calling this the summer of love. So I would say really embrace that and pour that into your writing. I have more to say from Nadia's interpretation of the planets and why that's going to be really important to approach your writing and everything through this lens of love. So this Neptune energy, as I said earlier, can be kind of illusionary. It can make us think we see things that we're not seeing, or not see things that we ought to see. And so it can be sort of manipulative, and it can sometimes take us into directions that are not good for us. So think about your go-to sources for help when you need to deal with big emotions. And depending on what those are, maybe, I've said this in other videos, maybe refocus those into your writing. Use your writing as the container for those emotions that might feel big or confusing or out of control. Having emotions is very important to being a human being. Often, almost always, we do what we do based on our emotions. And I think especially for us writers, this is a really important thing to keep in mind. Emotions add to our richness of life. And so if we can pour that again into our writing, we can only benefit from it. We will write better, we will write better characters, we will tell more universal stories that resonate with more people. So this is a time to really embrace our emotions. Even though this week, starting the week of June 16th, could be that emotions are going to feel kind of big or high or over the top. And the reason for that, there are some squares that are going to be happening during this week. And squares always make things feel a little like, right? Think of a square and hard edges. That's what squares kind of do. So if you notice this week that your emotions are being colored by fear and uncertainty, this can make us feel vulnerable when this happens. When we allow fear and uncertainty to kind of take over us, it doesn't work to our advantage ultimately. So think of this in the context of love, because Neptune is going to be squaring Venus. And this doesn't have to be about romantic love. It can be self-love as well. And the way we feel can make life either more difficult or easier. And during a time like this, we might acquire something that we think we want, and then we get it. And as Nadia says, we might realize that, I didn't really want that after all. So this could come in the form of, I heard someone talking the other day that don't say yes to the first agent that says yes to you. The advice that I heard was give it at least a couple of weeks with an agent and really kind of explore that agent, research them, see what you can find out, and just sit with it and see what comes to you. This time also might give us the impression that we're being loving, but it really might, as Nadia says, make us aware of the limits to the love that we give to others and ourselves. So again, in terms of writing, this could impact how we interact with our characters. It could have something to do with how we're treating our writing practices, which, as I say all the time, is really a reflection of our relationship with ourselves. Because I believe writing is an act of self-love. And if we avoid it, if we put it off to the side, then we're kind of doing the same thing to ourselves. And our our impulse to create, which is our life force. So one way to deal with all this energy is just to be super uber aware and really think about how we can make the best choices for the benefit of our writing. So what are we going to do if we have a big emotion and something comes up that we have to process and deal with? Are we going to have a cocktail, or are we going to sit down and write? Are we going to eat a whole chocolate bar, or are we going to sit down and write? Are we going to binge watch an entire season of a TV show in a day, or are we going to write? And I'll be honest, these questions are as much for me as they are you, because I'm one of the first to admit that I can do all three of those things simultaneously if I am trying to avoid something. But it never takes us, and I'm not saying that's not okay sometimes, because sometimes that's all we got. But in general, that doesn't really get us where we need to go, which is processing those things and getting our words on the page, right? So another square that will be happening is Neptune and Mars. So Mars will be changing signs soon and also going into Cancer. And this might give us mixed emotions. It might impact how we interpret words, other people's language and words. It might have the other effect, how people interpret ours. So if we take this idea that maybe our interpretations might be a little out of whack, and this idea of possibly seeing things through the lens of fear rather than love, it's really not a healthy way to use our imaginations, right? We start spinning these tales in our minds about what we imagine might be happening, or maybe we're imagining what might happen in the future. Really not the best use of our imaginations. So again, how do we apply this to writing? Well, could be that we have a really difficult scene to write. I met a woman recently who was writing a book, and she said she had just completely stalled out because she was getting to a section that she was dreading because it was going to be really difficult. You know, it might be about submitting your work. Maybe if you're a newer writer and you don't know that trick of submitting your work, just kind of broadcasting it like you would a bunch of seeds in a garden, just send it out. Start collecting rejection letters, because that's a sign that you are a working writer when you get rejection letters. And then there are also the good rejection letters that I've talked about. But if you have a fear of being rejected when you submit your work, that could be something that could kind of flare up right now. But as Nadia says, healthy optimism is the best right now. So do your very best to keep thinking positively. And I'm not being a Pollyanna, because I really hate that shit, because life is not all hearts and flowers. But when we're going through a difficult time like this, or what may feel difficult based on all these squares and energies that we have up above, it really helps if we can do our best to stay on track and think about the best outcomes with regard to our writing. So imagine people saying yes to your work. Imagine the words flowing. Imagine getting to the other side of that difficult scene or that difficult chapter, and what that's going to feel like. And this is kind of a gross analogy, but I think of things like that as when we have the flu and we're nauseous and we just feel like, I got to hold that down. But when we finally let it flow, we always feel better afterwards, right? And so that's how I think of facing difficult things with our writing practices. Just push through it. And once we're on the other side, we realize we're still okay. We're in one piece and we've been transformed in some way. We can't help but be. Here's an interesting way to think about things as well, and this is what Nadia says. She says, too much of telling ourselves we need to be safe nurtures more fear, because the more we're telling ourselves, I need to stay safe, I gotta stay safe, it makes us be more on the lookout for things to be afraid of. And I think this is a really interesting thing to think about. So again, how might this show up in your writing practice? Well, could be not wanting to share certain stories. Don't forget, that's what pseudonyms are for. And I understand that there are certain stories that we want to share, and there are certain people in our lives that would have an absolute conniption fit. And so I can understand and fully support when people decide to use a pseudonym. Putting off joining a writing group could be another way of letting the fear drive us to keep ourselves safe. Because I've said this too in other videos, some writing groups can be brutal. Some are not productive and helpful. And so of course, being selective, but just not doing it is not going to help if that is something you want. That's why I started Alchemy of Writing that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, because I want to create a safe space for creatives to get together, because I really think we need that. And I also know the world can be brutal. And sometimes just having this great idea, but not starting it. I have a TV show idea that I know is a great idea because I practice pitched it in a workshop. The pitch itself was a big hit. And I'll tell you why I've been afraid of pitching it to an agent, because my fear is that they will ask for 10 episode outlines. And I don't feel completely confident that I could do that. Even though deep down, of course I can. I can figure it out. I know like I can do that off the top of my head with a novel. It's just that TV is not it's not the realm that I'm accustomed to. So maybe I'm challenging you all to push past your fears. Maybe it's time for me to do that with this TV show pitch. So think about what you might be lagging on with your writing and really do your best to move through it and get super aware of what that resistance is. Because the more that we are aware about where our thoughts and fears come from and our responses to difficult feelings or imaginary stories that we tell ourselves, about our writing, and about other people, the better we can manage them and really put them in their proper place so that they don't keep sabotaging us. One more aspect I want to talk about. We're not even to the full moon yet. We're almost there. Okay, so on Thursday this week, the 20th, the sun will square Neptune. Okay, so that's another Neptune square that I mentioned before it moves into Cancer. And of course, it's the longest day of the year. I always like to think of solstice as it's the most light in a 24-hour period that we're going to have in the entire year. So I really like to embrace that as a metaphor and really think about how can we let that light illuminate our awareness about ourselves, about our writing practices, about projects that we're working on. So we can think about that as shining a light on parts of us that we tend to want to keep hidden, to keep us safe, right? Which goes back to what I was talking about earlier, about what Nadia said, really striving to keep ourselves safe can actually elicit more fear in us. We can think of it as allowing ourselves to illuminate that thing that we fear the most and writing about it. Because when we can turn a fear into words on a page, it can really take a lot of the oomph out of it and the power that it holds over us. And we can always then, once we've written about it, tear it up, burn it, flush it, right? We can do all those things. It doesn't have to stick around, but we get it out of ourselves. And oh, does that feel good? Or we can use the light to really think about the theme or the message of a project or a story, a novel that we're working on, and really get clear about what we want to say about it. Are we being vengeful with the message? Are we being more high-minded so that we can inform and raise consciousness about it with the hope of creating some kind of change? Nadia says another thing that I think is a really lovely way to think about things and contextualize this. She says, this period right now, especially this square to Neptune and moving into the summer solstice, is really a way for us to come out of the isolation of our own minds and really think about the light that fills the world. You know, and granted, like I said earlier, I'm not a Pollyanna. I'm always fully aware of the strife of life, but we can't stay there all the time, right? And so really taking this time of year, I love summer solstice just because of everything that it really kind of indicates and the symbolism of it. And really just think about all the light in the world and use this week, even with all these squares, and into the next week. So for the next 2 weeks, to think about our writing and our practices and what we want to do with it. What do we want our writing to stand for in the world? What do we want our writing to do? What is the purpose of our writing? Is it to heal? Is it to entertain? Is it to create change? I mean, it can be all of those things, but I think it's really helpful when we can get clear with ourselves about why writing means so much to us, why we want it to be out in the world. Because think about it, when we are dead and gone, our words and our writing, our stories will still exist. So as writers, we leave a legacy, which is the thing that keeps me going. Because, you know, if I could, I would live forever. Because there's so many things I want to accomplish. And I want to feel like my time on this earth has meant something. And so I love the fact that me being a writer, it means that I'm going to leave behind stories that will still touch people, even long after I'm gone. And so can you. All right, finally, let's get to the full moon. So as I mentioned earlier, so this full moon, June of 2024, is in Capricorn. The one that we will see in July will also be in Capricorn. And reminder, this one sets up the consequence we will see from what we've done during this time. Now, so a way to think about this is to really embrace the power that you possess in terms of your writing life and really get clear about the direction you want to see it go. Do you want to be published? Well, are you finishing stories? I'm notorious for starting many, many stories because I have way too many ideas and it takes me forever to finish one because I dabble. All right, so that's something I'm always working on. And what I want to do is I have one short story that I would love to get finished and send out to a publication that sent me one of those good rejections that I mentioned that, no, we won't take this one, but we'd love to see other work of yours. So what I want to do is focus on that short story and get it finished and start sending it out because I want to be more widely published. I've spent so much of my life teaching other people how to write that I've neglected my own practice. I want to see more of my work in print. That's a goal of mine. Another term that Nadia uses, which I just loved, is sacred ambition. So what is your sacred ambition as it pertains to your writing practice? And this is about having an awareness around how we might define success for ourselves in our writing. So what is that for you? I would love to know in the comments. How do you define success for yourself as a writer? And it could be in a number of ways, right? On a day-to-day basis, success could be just getting your butt in the chair and writing. A long-term success might mean, like I was saying earlier, being more widely published. So for example, for me, I have plans to move. I live in the Pacific Northwest. It's beautiful here, but this weather is just hell for me health-wise. And so I really need to move to a drier climate. And I have a plan in the works, but you know, it's not always that easy. And so I'm really working on that. And I believe that this move, when I can move from the environment that I'm in, a damp environment in the city, to a drier climate in the woods, it is most definitely going to enhance my writing practice. So what is it exactly that you want to focus on in your practice? Is it primarily to get words on the page right now? Is it about finishing a novel or a short story? Is it about finding an editor or an agent? So think about this just for the next 2 weeks. What is your sacred ambition around your writing for 2 weeks? Let me know in the comments. And really keep in mind, again, that what we do now, we will see the consequences for that the next full moon. And consequences can be good things, right? So let's all strive to do things now that will take us to positive consequences for our writing. So think of this full moon as an atmosphere where emotional truths will rise to the surface and won't really be finished off for another 30 or so days, 29 and a half days. I think, exactly. So I'll give you an example. I can't give you details about this thing, and this doesn't have to do exactly with my own writing. I can't share the details of it because it involves other people, and because of this very particular setting that it is in, I really can't say a lot. But there's this thing I'm going to have to do. It's not going to be easy. I have to set some boundaries, difficult boundaries, that are not going to be very popular. And I have to do it this week. So for me, thinking about the consequences that I may see from it in a month, it's a little unsettling. And so I really need to think about my word choice when I set these boundaries, how I go about it, the tone of the whole thing, and remember that I'm doing this for the greater good. So wish me luck. And even though I say it doesn't directly impact my writing practice, I say this a lot, I feel like everything impacts my writing practice. Because when I get that numbed out feeling, if you're a person who is neurodivergent in some way and you're very sensitive to things, you know what it's like to get dysregulated or to have like an internal meltdown. And you know how that can like steal time away from your life. When we're in those spaces, for me anyway, it's very difficult to write. I'm really working on seeing if I can change that. Like when I'm in that mode, if I can sit down and write and see what that might do for me. But for right now, I will admit that's a very hard thing for me to do. But the really good thing about this is in a month's time, we're going to have a full picture of whatever it is that comes up for us during this full moon cycle. So get really ready, sensitive souls, for this, what could be a very emotional week, and just hold strong and really embrace your power and the light that is coming the end of the week for the summer solstice. I'd also love to know what you're going to do on the solstice. I may do another video about just the solstice in general. Think about how fear and illusion might be cropping up in your life, and especially how you might apply it to your writing practice, whether it's interfering with your practice, informing it, or if your practice can help you in some way. And really think about how you can use your writing to not allow yourself to be taken down a path informed by fearful imagination about any aspect of your life. So let me know in the comments if this resonates with you in some way, If you had any kind of revelation, or if you have one over the next 2 weeks, I would love to hear. And I'd love to hear if you use your writing practice to deal with your big emotions, or if you sometimes, depending on what it is you're experiencing, if you get kind of stalled out like I do. And just tell me in general how your writing's going. I really would love to know. I don't know what it is. Whenever I hear about someone writing, it's like it flips on 100 switches inside me, and I just feel glorious. So please tell me. I'd love to know. All right, as always, sending you mad writing mojo. Happy writing.